Hello, all. And we are fortunate to have the great cynic, Mark Sleboda. Let's talk. Hello, all. It's Thursday at noon, and we have the one and only, the professional cynic himself, Mark Sleboda. Mark, welcome back to my humble channel.
Garland, thanks for having me. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be on the show.
And let's hear it for Mark Sleboda. There we go. All right. And let's hear it for Ursula von der Leyen. There we go. We're getting somewhere. All right, let's start here.
Who?
Ursula von der Leyen.
Joking.
Boo, that's who. Let's start. Mark Sleboda, well, for those out there who are wondering how they can keep up with all of Mark's good works, hey, what's this? Boosty.to/The Real Politique. Mark Sleboda, before we get going, what can people find on your Boosty page?
Yeah, so Boosty is like a sanctions-proof Patreon. That's why I use it. And I have 3 pieces of exclusive content on there every week. A in-focus video, a question and answer that you get to ask me questions, and a week in review. And we also have a private Discord channel so that we can discuss things without the trolls and the spam bots and everything else. And we can chat each other, text or audio or video or whatever. Discord's great that way. So, join us there and get on the soapbox.
Big news, too. We got 190 subscribers at Mark's Boosty page. Looky here, looky here. We're shooting towards 200. So I expect that by next week, there'll be 10 more subscribers so we can hit 200. All right, let us get rolling. Now, Mark, I understand that the information has come out from the most trusted sources in Europe, particularly Poland, that the Russians have launched a merciless and relentless drone attack against the Poles, obviously targeting the most critical sectors of their military and economy, and that this has caused them to invoke Article 4, not 5, Article 4. And I have seen, I think somebody recorded the response from the Kremlin. All right, Mark. Drone Gate. That's why don't we dub it Drone Gate, which seems to have, ran its course fairly quickly. But what do we know about Drone Gate, Mark?
Yeah, okay, so with all the headlines and the hype and the furor and the outrage and everything, very quietly, NATO put out an official statement that they don't consider the incident to be an attack. Boom, right? I mean, everything else is just kind of, they immediately put that out, right? I mean, the politicians that want escalation between the West and Russia are milking this for all it is worth, right? Exactly as they were meant to do. But the powers that be are not. And it has to be said, even the Polish president, before he jumped on it, allowed time for at least some type of preliminary investigation of the incident, presumably by his own military and intelligence, to determine what happened. And this looks either a accident as a result of electronic warfare, or there's actually increasing evidence that it was an actual false flag event by the Kiev regime. Now, several Russian-made drones entered Polish airspace during the midst of Russian drone and missile strikes that were heavily pummeling military industrial facilities, and including some stuff I'm sure that just came across the border from Poland. um, in Western Ukraine, in Lvov, Ivano-Frankivsk, Ternopil, and the like. But there was also a number of Russian drones that evidently went quite far into Polish territory, right? We're talking 50 kilometers beyond the border. Now, that is not within the range of accident or simply maneuvering for a strike, which is possible and is another thing entirely. What we do know is the drones that crashed. There is claims that some of them were shot down, although evidently quite belatedly by Polish air defense. These were Gerbera drones, right? Gerbera are decoys. They are cheap. They're often made of plywood. They're or cheap materials. They are superficially assembled to look like a Garan, the profile of a drone, from the surface, but they're not. Now they can carry a reconnaissance package. Sometimes they do function as a reconnaissance or repeaters, and it is theoretical that they could be equipped with a small strike package, right? They wouldn't be able to carry much because they're very lightweight. They wouldn't be able to carry, but there's no evidence that any of the handful of these Gerbera drones that were brought down or appeared on the ground in Poland, because there's some very unusual circumstances there, were carrying any type of explosive charge whatsoever. Now, interestingly, the Belarusian chief of the general staff, their equivalent of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, evidently contacted Poland before they crossed into Polish airspace and alerted them of that. This is what the Belarusians say. The Poles don't seem to be publicly acknowledging this, but the Belarusians say that they alerted the Poles. They were already shooting some of these down, and they say that they suggested that these drones may have been, shall we say, hijacked by electronic warfare and diverted off course, which is entirely something within the capability of electronic warfare. You can, from afar, effectively, there are electronic warfare weapons that allow you to hijack a drone and land it somewhere very distant. So that is a possibility. Another possibility that has been raised, this has been reported by Ukrainian Telegram channels, as the whole thing was a false flag incident, that these were Gerbera drones that had been brought down or captured by the Kiev regime previously, and that in the event of the latest big Russian drone strike within Poland, or I'm sorry, within Western Ukraine, that they were launched out of Ukraine into Poland in an event to try, of course, the goal is, of course, to drag Poland and the rest of NATO into direct war with Russia. Now, the Russian Ministry of Defense put out a very terse denial, like they're affronted that they even have to answer this, feces. It was not polite. It was basically saying that there were no targets designated in Poland. And they also pointed out that the range of the Gerbera drones is such that they're talking some 700 kilometers, that the distance that they're talking them appearing behind the border in Poland is out of their range from where they were launched, which again raises the possibility that these were launched, by the Kiev regime and made to, as a false flag event. Now, I saw some interesting pictures of these supposed Gerbera drones brought down in Poland. I noticed that one of them was duct taped together. Like, did the Russians really launch it like that? I'm just kind of curious. Another one was on a chicken coop, on a wooden ramshackle chicken coop. And it evidently, I don't know, fell from the sky or, I don't know, teleported down and landed on that chicken coop somehow without doing any damage to this extremely not a solid one, and not even a solid chicken coop, right? A very ramshackle old chicken coop, somehow without smashing. Like, even assuming no weapons or anything like that, you would think simply falling from the sky, something that, it's not a little FPV drone, right? It's several feet across, and it landed perfectly on top of a chicken coop, apparently without doing any damage to I don't have any explanation for that. Do you?
Yeah, with the keyboard crash. They did this. Yeah. Create me a picture of a Russian drone crash on a chicken coop. Yeah, that's a good. What do you think of that one? Try it again. Let's try another AI image creator, like the ones I use for my thumbnail, some crap like that, or either they just took something and set it up there. It's
that's
amateurish. What they do is so amateurish.
Yeah, it is. There was also fragments of a missile, but this was an AIM missile supplied by the U.S. to the Kiev regime.
The Russians stole it, reprogrammed it, and then fired it back at. No, you know what? I would expect. The Russians. Of course, they shouldn't. They wouldn't say this, but the Russians should have said, "Trust me, Poland. If we targeted you, you wouldn't have to guess. If we targeted you, you wouldn't be guessing right now whether or not."
I have to admit, if Russia had launched a drone strike into Poland, which is effectively the logistical rear, right, of the Kiev regime, right? We've had the U.S. admit that this is a U.S. NATO proxy war, right? Mark Rubio admitted it outright when the Trump administration first took office against Russia in Ukraine. It would be perfectly legitimate for Russia to exercise the right to strike where these equipment was being assembled in Poland and sent across the border. I personally would not have any problem with it. Bring it, right? But that is however much I would like to see that, right? I don't believe that this is the case at all. I think that this is either, again, some example of either electronic warfare capture or an overt false flag incident by the Kiev regime. And certainly Russia did not intentionally send these drones, but that far into the airspace. Reportedly, one somehow was 300 kilometers into Polish airspace. It's all the lack of response from the official response from the United States, and the very quiet but definitive statement by NATO, we don't consider this an attack, and they just dropped it. That leaves all kinds of space for politicians who want to milk it, but it made clear that there wasn't going to be any official response. Poland invoking Article 4 is actually just for consultations. That's what Article 4 is. There's been an incident, and we're going to have consultations, right? And it may have been may have quietly behind closed door. Yeah, the Ukrainians were trying to lure us into this again, but we can't actually admit that, and we got to spank their hands and say they were bad. That may have been what the consultation actually was, but as far as I'm concerned, this is really a non-incident. It's been a while, but we have seen such incidences before where the Kiev regime was literally launching drones into Ukraine and missiles, and only later was it admitted that they were Ukrainian.
Wasn't
We
it a
went
week
through.
or so ago or 2 weeks ago that a former Polish president said, yeah, remember that time they fired a S-300 missile into Poland and then they tried to drag the US and he said something like their wet dream, I don't know if that's the term, but whatever, their dream is to drag all of NATO into it. This was like 2 weeks ago, where
Yes.
literally a former Polish president said that. And it's like the Ukrainians were like, damn it. Why didn't we think of that? Let's give that a hey, get some guys in here. Let's give that a shot again. We got an old cardboard mock-up of a Russian drone. No, well, shut the hell up and make one. Let's get it into Poland and get this thing underway. It seems like that.
Yeah, it does.
Unbelievable. I gotta ask you a question. And not, just about one thing about the Charlie Kirk thing. Just one question about that I find interesting. He was on the Miro Vets hit list. Did you know that?
Yeah.
And
I mean,
not
try to find someone who isn't on the alt media who isn't on the Mirror Towards skill list. It's like, if you aren't on there, what have you not been doing?
That's a good point. What Tulsi Gabbard has been on there, Rand Paul. I mean, you're nobody if you face it. You're nobody if you ain't on the Mirror Vets hit list these days. But I look at that and it's like
Roger Waters is on there, for Christ's sake.
God, that guy made some of the best music ever, for God's sake. But oh well, it is what it is. Okay, so let's move on. Well, I've talked about with a couple people. I got Larry Johnson a little bit later. We're going to talk about the Charlie Kirk thing too. And here's the bottom line: we don't know until we know something. It's all guesswork. We know somebody shot him. It's terrible and all of that, but we're still trying to sort this thing out.
I didn't even know who the guy was. So
he was a Trump guy, supporter.
Yeah, exactly. Guy. I didn't know who he was.
I'll be honest. And you knew about as much about Charlie Kirk as I did. I really knew nothing about him except his name. I didn't know he was in charge of Turning Points USA. I'm like, isn't that the thing that what's her name? The pretty black girl. I can't think of her name. I used to go on Fox with her. With the straight hair. I can't think of her name. But at any rate, she's Candace Owens. But wasn't she? I thought she was just shows. I thought she was with Turning Point USA or something. I can't keep up with that. I don't keep up with that stuff. That to me, that's like, what did Lindsay Lohan or Beyonce do or stuff? I don't keep, it's not real. But I'll tell you what is real. What do you think about the Doha thing? The attack and all of that kind of stuff?
First of all, it needs to be said that the US and the UK were instrumentally involved in this, right? I mean, once again, we have the US luring this. This seems to be Trump's MO, right? How many times is this now? He invites someone for diplomatic, talks, for consultations, and then there's he or one of his proxies, it attempts an assassination on them, right?
I'm counting four.
Yeah. Qasem Soleimani was lured to Iraq, a third-party country, and Trump themselves assassinated him right there, along with several Iraqi generals, by the way. We've got Hamas previously.
The Hezbollah leader. Same thing happened to the
Hezbollah leader. They was lured out of by talk of negotiations as well. We had the recent attack on Iran. Right, that was quite openly. I mean, the Israeli media said outright that Trump maintained a fiction of negotiations in order to get the Iranians to lower their guard for what was hoped to be a surprise decapitation strike. And now this was in Qatar, in Doha, someone who is serving as a mediator and has served as a mediator for multiple conflicts throughout the Middle East. This just isn't done. It is a betrayal, of course, not only of a diplomatic process, but of Qatar, which, it must be said, is a long-standing U.S. ally. There is a major U.S. military airbase, CENTCOM, in Qatar. The fact that a U.S. reconnaissance plane that was used, right, for the attack flew out of Doha into the sky and evidently, provided intelligence for this Israeli strike while it was happening. We know the British did mid-air refueling for these planes to enable it. And of course, I mean, the piece de resistance says they didn't actually kill the Hamas leadership that they were after. I mean, they killed a few people, on the extended party, right? The son of somebody and a bodyguard or something of the like. But they didn't actually kill any of the delegation. But I mean, rightly, Qatar is pissed, and their first response was the U.S. Right? Well, this is the second time now that you have not defended us, that you are supposedly providing air defense, right? It's your air defense systems, and they were not activated once when Iran launched missiles in response to what you were doing out of our country against Iran, right? Presumably without Qatar's permission. And secondly, now this, and they were in our house, invited for negotiations that you invited them to. And what's more, they were, under our protection because they were there invited by us. We were the hosts. Therefore, their safety is our responsibility. And you betrayed us, right? We'll put aside, what we, anyone may think of Hamas, right? They were invited for negotiations by you. We were responsible for mediating those negotiations, and now you have sullied our name. You have rubbed us in the dirt with your treachery. And they use the word betrayal. Now, they said that they are going to respond to what Israel has done. I don't put much credence on that. And I don't actually expect them to, kick out a U.S. military base or something, kick out the U.S. military base in Qatar. But certainly trust is gone. I mean, this is exactly why when Putin went to Alaska, I was like, I don't think, I mean, the risk is probably minimal unless the U.S. really wants nuclear war. But is even minimal risk worth it when you're dealing with a country like the United States? And that's where we are now. No one, forget the substance of negotiations. Forget, a betrayal of what you sign later. They're killing you just for coming to talk to them, luring you out with that. As far as I'm concerned, the U.S. and Israel are rogue states that you literally can't talk with them. There's nothing you can do with them, right? You can try to ignore them, but you engage with them at your own peril.
Yes. Well, yeah, I agree. Now I'll say this. I don't think they're stupid. I think the U.S. will bully whoever they can and everyone else, right? They ain't going to do nothing like that to Russia or China. But they know who they can push around. You know how bullies are. They know who they can push around and who they can't. And they ain't doing that to Russia or China because they know they can't do that and they're not stupid. But here's something I want to throw at you, Mark. Not that we trust the U.S. to turn down the volume on anything, but there's all this stuff coming out about a new defense posture that's going to say, we can't take Russia and China head on. Now, you got to be stupid now. Look, you look at these military parades, you look at military technology, you look at what's happening with the U.S., and anybody who thinks that we can militarily take on Russia and China would have to be completely insane. And I think there are people in Washington, D.C., maybe I'm wrong, not all of them, but are like, yeah, guys, we really can't do this. And they're right in military posture. But I would say this, I'll finish up with this. But I think they're trying to just like, well, we can we can do a chaos everywhere in the world. Let's color revolutions everywhere. Nepal, let's take that down. Armenia, Azerbaijan, and I think like maybe an alternate strategy is let light fires every damn way every place they're pyromaniacs. It's if we can't take them head on, we know what we can do. We can light fires everywhere. That'll really screw with them. Not that I even know if there's a plan behind it. Anyway, Mark, I'll throw that at you.
Yeah, so man, let me hit on that last part first. I'm almost starting to believe that there are very different factions within the U.S. government operating at even cross purposes to each other, and certainly one faction is saying at this point, you don't want to give up trying to take Ukraine away from us after we've marked it as NATO territory. Well, then, we're going to take Syria away from you. We're going to take Nepal away from you. We're going to launch regime, decapitation strikes against Iran, even though they weren't successful. Venezuela, right? What looks likely, but it seems almost like that to me, that it is Russia has a hold of a U.S. proxy regime in Ukraine and is not letting go. I mean, they've got it by the neck and they're not letting go. And the U.S. is stop it. And I'll hit this one and I'll hit that one and I'll hit that one. Just let mine go. And Russia's not letting go, right? What happened in Nepal has, Victoria Nuland was literally there before she just meeting with some of the leaders of these protest NGOs before a little over a year before this happened. So the groups were funded by U.S. companies and by U.S. NGOs. I don't think there's really any question there. It was a communist government, however flawed, we can talk, allied with China, and they did what they do. They exploited legitimate political grievances as an instrument of U.S. foreign policy, which is whether it's political grievances or ethno-religious differences or the like, they're very, very good at it. That is their number one power. Right, more so than power projection with stealth bombers or anything, their ability to reach into countries that don't have complete control of their information space, don't have a digital firewall, that prevents them, much less monetary and everything else, and they can flip a government. They've done it again and again and again, and Russia and China really need to, I think, start bringing it home to the rest of the world that the information space is a battle space, right? That you need to protect your digital sovereignty as well as your physical sovereignty, or you will pay the price. So now, with regards to what some other people in the administration may be doing on a completely different page, this article that was out, it came out last weekend in Politico. Pentagon plan prioritizes homeland over China threat. This marks a major departure from the first Trump administration, which emphasized deterring Beijing. This is really interesting. I did an In Focus video on my own channel on this on Monday. This article reports to be from sources who have seen a draft of the U.S. new national security doctrine that is supposedly on Hegseth's desk now. It's not finalized yet. And that doctrine is basically a doctrine of, I would call it hegemonic retreat and retrenchment. The idea is not to give up on hegemony, but to give up on the U.S. enforcing U.S.-led Western global hegemony directly. It for U.S. forces to effectively withdraw their active operations to the United States, a focus on domestic security and within the Western Hemisphere, which is not going to do anything for countries like Venezuela, admittedly, that's going to put targets on them. But the idea seems to be that the U.S. is no longer going to actively pursue an aggressive containment and confrontation strategy against countries like China and Russia and Iran. Now, they will be trying to encourage their proxies in the regions, Europe, right, the Philippines, Taiwan,
Nepal.
Israel, to do so. But they want them to pick up more of the burden sharing. Again, this is Pete Hegseth's, when he initially came in, his talk of division of labor, right? You guys need to pick up the ball. So we'll be glad to sell you weapons, and you can have a green light to do this. Maybe we'll provide you intelligence. But the idea, which the U.S. Navy and Air Force have had for some time, that they're going to be engaging China in an air and naval missile and drone war against China in the Taiwanese Straits, in the South China Sea, in China's own backyard. I think they're giving up. They've run enough war games that show China winning every time, right? That it appears that they've gone. And what's really interesting to me is the person who's penning this is Elbridge Colby. And Elbridge Colby is maybe the China hawk, with a capital T, in Washington, which means that he had to, if this is what the report says it is, right? What this Politico report says it is, based on sources who have seen. Okay. But if it's true, then Elbridge Colby has had some exposure to some information or some Damascene conversion and is backing off of active containment and confrontation with China, probably because there's been a realistic assessment. And I'm not a fan of Elbridge Colby as a person, right? I don't support, U.S. officials. Elbridge Colby is right now the undersecretary of, well, not defense anymore, war, the undersecretary of war for policy, which is a lot more important than it sounds. And as this article in Politico makes clear, not only is he responsible for this draft, but he and his team are also undergoing they're the ones responsible for a U.S. force posture review, which is they're allowed to question where U.S. troops are abroad, right? There's hundreds of bases that the U.S. is at and so forth, and a review of U.S. air defense systems and interceptors, which I have long been saying is the U.S.'s Achilles heel, right? Not only against China, but against Iran, but Russia. The U.S. just doesn't have good enough air defense, and it doesn't make enough air defense interceptors for the Patriots that it has, right? And that's clear in Ukraine, in Israel, and plenty of other places. So this is really interesting, because if he's responsible for all of this, that is allowing him to really not only create a new U.S. grand vision, but actually act on it. If you're the one who's deciding where, reviewing where troops are abroad, you then have the power to act on it. And that's really interesting to me. Elbridge Colby is a realist if John Mearsheimer could make a U.S. official, right, it would be Elbridge Colby, because he touts, John Mearsheimer's realist, U.S. international relations scholar of record, probably one of the greatest realist scholars of all time. That is exactly Mearsheimer's position, that from a realist international relations perspective, the number one threat to the U.S. position in the world right now is China. That Russia and Iran are inconsequential in those regards, and that the U.S. should prioritize China, and that is Elbridge Colby, right? I mean, that has long been his position. And Elbridge Colby, again, he's a China hawk. I don't support that position at all, but he's not a dumb guy. He might be one of the few really intelligent people in the Trump administration. So it is interesting to see if what we're hearing about this draft of this doctrine, of this new national security doctrine, is true, because it would be a bigger acknowledgement that the U.S. really is limited, that they have to prioritize what they can and cannot do because they don't have the resources. Their prospective opponents are, growing in power, and that the unipolar moment that has defined much of our lives for the last few decades is over. Now, the question that no one seems to be asking is, who leaked this?
Yes.
And why? There's two options. One, either the authors, right, or the Secretary of War, did as a trial balloon to see how people would react to it, or two, the people who are against this, right, the people who believe that the U.S. should be actively engaging against Russia and China and Iran all at the same time, out of some ideological exceptionalist suicidal impulse, because they're bad and we're good, that sort of thing, and they want to think.
Can I give you one other option, which isn't that much different from yours? Option one, they leaked it to run it up the flagpole and see if anybody salutes, as they say. Let's see who pushes back on it. Another could be this: the decision has been made, and we're going to leak it out so people can come to us and complain, and we can tell you, dude, the decision's been made. You know what I mean? I've seen that working when I was in law enforcement, when let's say the superintendent was going to make a policy that he knew was going to be, and I've been one of the leakers, right? And you let it out. Why? Because people are going to push back, and you say, oh, blah, 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 doesn't like this. And you find out who doesn't like it. And you bring them in and you tell them, look, you better get on board with this, because this is what's going to happen. If you want this fight, you're going to have a fight with the big guys, and everybody's on his side. So the other thing is to get it out there, to find out who would fight back, and to squelch all of that, so you can have that fight before you release it. That way you release it clean. You've already had all the fights you need. So that's something that I used to work with a superintendent, the chief of police, that was his way of doing things. Have the fights before you release it, instead of releasing it and have the fights afterwards, which is right down the line of what your first option was, which was, it's still the same. We're going to release it early to get feedback.
So it's an interesting bureaucratic mentality.
Yes.
It's interesting. Elbridge Colby, his grandfather was the director of the CIA in the 1960s, right? He comes from a pedigree of national security. So he is a deep state beast, right? I mean, that is his natural environment. So what you're suggesting is entirely within his possible playbook, I would say. So.
Yeah, again, I came from a police department, bureaucracy. That is the bureaucrat, very, very bureaucratic, but it's a very hierarchical in power. This is the limit of your power. This is who you're over. And when it gets up to the superintendent, we had a superintendent that came in and pounded the table. I'm the Pope. I'm this. He literally said, I'm the Pope. I'm the general. I'm in charge of everything, and no one should ever challenge me. And he was a jokester, a good guy, but he just did it because he knew he needed to establish power. But I think more likely that the decision has been made, because I think it is a combination. It is the Pentagon saying, look, did you see just what happened in Iran? We're running out of stuff, and we can't make it fast enough. 7-year wait right now for a new what are those things called? The Patriots. 7-year wait, and they don't even work. You know,
Yeah.
we're losing in Ukraine, and that's a lost cause. We can't even beat the Houthis. Guys, we're out of stuff, and we're losing to the Houthis. We got to come to an understanding now. Fighting in the Black Sea or the Taiwan Strait is no longer an option. First of all, let's get the hell out of Europe as quick as we can, because it seems to me that there is a move afoot. But there's a thought. And of course, it's let's make the Europeans fight. And what do you think? Do you think there's a move afoot? And part of it is they can't afford it because the U.S. is going broke. But what do you think about that? This talk
Yeah,
of
I
taking
mean,
troops out?
at the same time, right? We've heard, rumors, right? I mean, inside the Beltway sources, but rumors in the Washington Post and the New York Times that the Trump administration wants to pull U.S. troops out of Europe. And just in the last week, it was announced that the U.S. is going to stop funding training programs for troops in the Baltics, right? And equipment for them and the like. So what are being called frontline contact states against Russia. So, these yappy dogs, these snarling chihuahuas that the Baltics are no longer going to get, I don't know what, aggressive training or whatever, which, I have to imagine that Russia's like, they just kind of shrug. I mean, it's not like
we hadn't noticed.
Yeah, it's not like that effective anyway, but it does indicate that this may be in the works, that this may be real, and that may already be being enacted to some degree at some levels, within the White House, within the Pentagon. So it's interesting. I think it's one of the most interesting things to come out of the Trump administration, foreign policy wise. And it is reassuring. Again, I don't like Elbridge Colby, but I know that he's a lot smarter than a lot of other people within the Trump administration. So, and if he really has had this assessment that the U.S. is no longer capable of actively confronting China, on their own side of the Pacific, that is also reassuring because it says that there's someone sane in the White House, which is not always immediately evident. I mean, take a look at Europe right now. There's no one sane there. I mean, other than Orban. Kaya Kallas, von der Leyen, right? The report out of Hungary. Yeah.
Kaya Kallas. Man, she is everything, every indicator that Europe is spiraling into moral, economic, and intellectual destruction, oblivion, is Kaya Kallas. She's stupid. She's mean and ornery and Nazi-ish, and she's confrontational. I mean, you're from a country. I live in Maryland. It's a small state, and you're not even a small part of Maryland. Wise. Population wise, and she's like going to China. You must do what we say. Don't you know who we are? And China's like, you gotta be kidding me. You know what I mean? China's like looking at her like, get out of here, really? And the world's looking at her, not even in condescension and disdain, but in disbelief that somebody that stupid could be in a position that they put her in. And she doesn't even realize, what is it? She's stupid. She doesn't know that she's stupid. However that goes all the way around, unconscious ignorance. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. I mean, not only is she stupid, but she thinks she's brilliant. And she thinks that she's morally superior, as a European, that Europeans, are this exceptional, morally, structurally superior civilization that has the right to rule the world. The hubris is off the charts, and it's the type of hubris that you really have to wonder if they even know the definition of the word hubris, because they're that dumb. I mean, that's essentially Russia's assessment when she says, "Imagine thinking that the Soviet Union and China, were the instrumental ones in defeating the Axis powers in World War II," and you're like, "Well, yeah." I mean, like 80% of German troops and far more than that of European fascist allies, like, oh, I don't know, the Baltic states that fought on the side of Nazi Germany. Um, it's, yeah,
There we go. The look
if
of
Europe,
confusion, Mark. That is the look of complete and total confusion of a person that like is so stupid, confused, baffled. She is baffled by the world around her. Look at the look on her face. It just tells you all you need to know.
yeah, I mean, like she's supposed to be in some B grade romantic comedy, and instead she's the EU's high foreign policy muckety muck. I mean, it's ridiculous. There are no statesmen in Europe, right? At the national level, at the EU level. If you were a European, you should probably weep for Europe. I mean, Europe has a long history of incredible leaders that shook the world. And the leaders they have today are only shaking Europe as they, they collapse the whole thing. It's embarrassing.
What are your thoughts on the political situation in France with Macron?
Yeah, unfortunately, the reality is that France has a super presidential system that grants the president enormous amounts of powers to effectively govern, even when he doesn't have a government, a parliament that is cooperating with him. And what's more is that structurally, right, French politics is such that the one party that could take power that would change things, the National Rally Party, is going to be blocked from ever assuming power unless they can come up with an over 50% majority of the country, which, they have a plurality, but over 50%. It's much like the AfD in Germany, whereas all the other forces, even the supposedly anti-centrist far left, will cooperate with Macron to keep the National Rally Party out of power, which is preventing any type of real, foreign policy or domestic, change, which is desperately needed from occurring. So unfortunately, it seems that Macron is just going to rinse and recycle. He's already appointed a new prime minister. They'll put forward a new budget. It'll get voted down, but by then it'll be another year and he'll have lived out his entire presidency. So we're going to have to suffer another year of Macron. And there's no immediate way to get rid of him. The impeachment procedures in France are just practically impossible to enact. So it's unlikely. And, even with the National Rally Party and the far left having far more seats in the French parliament, Macron has, through playing the sides off of each other, still been able to dominate and run the French parliament with a minority. So
France is screwed. That's a long way of saying France is completely and totally
France
screwed.
is going to be absolutely, really ungovernable for the next year, right? I mean, where they are is where they are, right? There's not going to be any improvement. There's not going to be any major change. But I also don't see any real initiatives either. I don't think that Macron is going to be able to fulfill his, dying wish of getting French troops killed in mass numbers in Ukraine. But, he's going to give it his best shot because he can't obviously do anything domestically. Everything domestically that he has attempted for his time in office has completely failed. So I guess foreign policy is, the last refuge of those who can't do anything domestically in that regard, and he's going to try to leave his legacy. He's right up there with Starmer and Merz, the British Prime Minister and the German Chancellor, that seem to have absolutely no interest in their own country's economic situation, in their own domestic situation, and is just obsessed and fixated on fighting Russia and Ukraine.
The last thing I wanted to ask you about is, and this is, of course, the driver of many things, probably a big portion of even Elbridge Colby's new lease on life. What's happening on the battlefield?
Yeah. So I think the big story this week is the Kiev regime. I mean, other than the long range strikes, which are obviously grabbed the headlines with this nonsense about the Polish and everything, but an acknowledgement that Russian forces are fighting on the ground inside several key cities that have been encircled and effectively put into operational encirclement for some time, but now the fighting is in the cities. And one of these is Kupiansk, and the other one is Seversk, and the third one is Pokrovsk. And this is just, the Kiev regime is just fighting for time at this point. They've obviously lost all three of these cities. They're trying to, particularly in Kupiansk, to extract what forces they can get out, but it may already be too late. The encirclement has gone too far. They've been cut off from retreat routes. But all of these places are going to fall, within.
And what are the names of those three towns again?
Kupiansk, right? Which is in southern Kharkov region, right?
What's that near? What's the big town that's nearest?
Let's see here. Right, it's difficult for me to make out your map. Okay, so north of Bakhmut.
Bakhmut. Oh, there was where Soledar and all of that.
Yeah. That was last year, right? So considerably north of Bakhmut.
Okay. Up towards Seversk, say between Bakhmut.
Yeah. Seversk is one of them, right? And then Kupiansk is northwest of Slavyansk. Of Seversk. And the third one is to the south from there, the south vaguely west, and that is Pokrovsk, right? Which it was that former logistics hub that we've all been, and also Konstantinovka, because Russian forces, right? If you go down Konstantinovka right there, Russian forces are also fighting inside Konstantinovka as well. There's actually four. Forgive me. There's actually four of these places that Russian forces have now, broken through defenses and are fighting, in the cities. And this is big. This is major. That this is going on. This is all along the Donbass and southern Kharkov contact line. And there was word early in the week from Kiev regime channels that they were warning that Russia has carried out in the past 2 weeks, Russia has carried out the largest regrouping since 2022, and that they were moving large numbers of troops around from Zaporozhye, from Sumy, and that they were about to launch, and are now about to launch, I should say, a renewed major offensive to finish off Donbass. That is what the autumn holds, basically, and that they had positioned large numbers of troops from other areas in order to see this happen, and that seems likely to me. I don't contest that at all. So Russia seems, they want to finish Donbass off this year, or all but finish it off, right? And they can maybe going into next year, Slavyansk and Kramatorsk, well, will be under siege. But I expect all of these four locations that we've just mentioned, Kupansk and also Liman, in that direction, Kupansk, Seversk, Konstantinovka, and Pokrovsk. I expect them all to be liberated by Russia before the end of the year. Maybe considerably before the end of the year in some of those cases. Kupansk seems like it's almost done. It's almost wrapped up. And that's important because Russia had taken Kupansk, very quickly early in the conflict, and then had to retreat from southern Kharkov, including Kupansk, in the autumn of 2022, when they were caught because they hadn't mobilized forces, and the Kiev regime and they had a manpower shortage, and they had to do those withdrawals from southern Kharkov and from Kherson city, which was embarrassing at the time, and led to all kinds of false assumption that the Kiev regime was winning in the Western media and perspective. So this is everything to the north there. Kupansk, Liman, Izium is all about bringing the pressure on this last defensive line, this Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, Konstantinovka line from the north, as well as the east and the south. That's why that northern move through Kupansk, Liman, and Izium is so important, because it will make defensive positions in Slavyansk undefendable.
A question from your thoughts, and this is something I've been thinking about. Okay, you'll know this better than me. So the time is coming where this fortified area will be defeated. Because when it gets to a point where there's only a few stragglers left, they got to get the hell out of there. We see a bridge being blown up recently over the Dnieper. I don't know what that was about, but
it was damaged. It wasn't blown.
Okay. Yeah. We're coming to that point where the Donbass, where Eastern Ukraine, where the fortified areas that were set as a trap for Russia are defeated. What then? Does that effectively, some people argue, well, effectively the war's over because Russia, but it's not really, because there's other things going on. Will they cross I believe Russia goes up and does the land bridge to Transnistria. I don't know. What then from Mark Sleboda's perspective?
Yeah, then we just continue. I mean, they've already been given enough chances. They made clear, I believe at one point Russia believed that they were going to pause after the Donbass is fully liberated and say, "Are you done?" But I think they've already gotten the answer to that the Kiev regime, that the Europeans have absolutely no indication that they are going to seek terms, that they're going to accept that they've been defeated, and they're going to fight on, which means that Russia will have to take more territory and just bring the war to them. And so we're looking at Dnipropetrovsk region, Kharkov region, Zaporozhye region, probably moves on Zaporozhye city next year. And
Kiev?
Yeah. Okay. So if I was in charge, I would be going for Kiev. I would be going for the head of the snake.
Yep.
And there are Belarusian military drills going on right now, which were what was used back in 2022 to position Russian troops for the initial 2022 move down towards Kiev, just saying. But, we'll have to see. I believe it would be the smart thing, but is also the thing that would draw the most reaction from the West.
They got nothing. They got nothing, And Trump ain't going. I'm convinced Trump ain't. Trump, him and JD Vance. I would like to say over their dead bodies, but the way these people act, it wouldn't stop me if it were.
Do they actually have the power to stop? Do they
or the desire. Trump don't. He hates.
I believe he doesn't really have the desire.
despise.
But my question is, does he have the power? Because I don't think he has the power to withstand a concentrated deep state, Congress, bipartisan Congress, all the Europeans, if they are dead set on dragging the U.S. into war on Russia. And the Europeans, right, they know that they can't fight Russia on the battlefield, but that's not the thing. Just a human tripwire force. And then will come the pressure on the U.S. Oh, Russia's beating up on us. Article 5, you have to come save us. And there will be enormous pressure. And I just don't believe that Donald Trump has ever demonstrated, right? That whole taco thing. I don't think he has the political capital or the will to resist. It's far more than just the neocons. I mean, the entire U.S. establishment, other than him and J.D. Vance and maybe one or two other people, including within his own administration, are the neocons today.
Well, it wouldn't be popular on the ground here, man. If they tried, its country would be torn to shreds. You know what I mean? It wouldn't. I don't know how they do it here. You know what I mean? The country might break. So that would be just a political disaster to try it. Gosh, they might get revolt in the United States. People ain't for that crap. I'll tell you that right now. And let me say this. If you think, the support that our government has for people 30 and under, the ones that would be expected to go fight Russia, there was something where I saw this. The support for Israel amongst 30 and under in the U.S. is like effectively at 0%. The government does not have a lot. For the government to say to the people that age, you're going to go fight Russia, they burn this place to the ground. So even if they decided they were going to do it, it would be U.S. suicide. I think Elbridge Colby kind of realizes the direction these things are going. At any rate, Mark, let's not forget, everybody, we got to remember good old Mark. And Mark, tell everybody once again, the real politique at boosty.com and what the heck that actually is.
Yeah, it's a sanctions-proof Patreon, basically. And if you want to support me and you want access to lots of exclusive content, private Discord channel, interviews with me, private interviews with me, all of that is available there for various subscriber levels. So join us there if you can't get enough of your favorite cynic and black belt.
That's Mark Sleboda, boosty.to/the real politique. Thanks a lot, Mark. Certainly appreciate it and look forward to talking to you. Oops. There we go. All this clicking on stuff gets me confused. Look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Thanks for having me, Carly.
Thank you, Mark. Take it easy. Everybody, if you can afford it, you see everything scrolling across the bottom, and you can donate. And even if you can't, the most important thing you can do is share this on all your social media platforms. We're out.